national à notre séance plénière de clôture. Je remercie le bureau au podium. Merci bien de m'accompagner. Toute l'équipe de l'UNESCO, aux vice-présidences qui se trouvent ici parmi nous. On peut dire cher et cher pendant toutes ces journées qu'on a passées ensemble. Il y a des ministres, des représentants, des délégations, des nations du monde pour commencer cette séance plénière. Je veux remercier sincèrement d'avoir voyagé depuis très loin, depuis vos pays, pour être arrivé à Mexico. Cela nous a permis de construire une rencontre historique. Le Mexique est fier de vous avoir accueilli pendant ces 3 jours, devenant ainsi l'épicentre de la réflexion mondiale sur la culture. Nous avons travaillé ensemble pendant 3 jours tout au long et ce chemin a commencé depuis 2 ans. Tout au long des 18 séances ministérielles thématiques, nous avons partagé les visions, présenté les défis, les aspirations de nos pays respectifs pour renforcer les secteurs de la culture, moteur du développement durable inclusif. Nous avons entendu plein de voix, nous avons entendu des ministres, des vice-ministres, les directeurs des États membres et partenaires de l'UNESCO. En liberté. Au cours des 13 événements parallèles, nous avons entendu les voix de nombreux professionnels, artistes, décideurs politiques et représentants de la société. Nous avons été témoins de que la culture est that the diplomatic world has today to bring together humankind under this fine blanket with so many voices and knowledge. I would like to propose the main axes of our session, our closing session. To begin, we are going to take stock of the work of the conference over the course of the past 3 days. Within a few minutes, we will listen to the report of our rapporteur. We will also hear the most outstanding issues that took place in the side events. We will also have a video that will refer to the foremost moments of the events. Then we will go on to adopt the final declaration of the conference. And we will close with a special artistic event that was created specifically for Mondiacult, La Oreja y el Caracol. And now I would give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Hilmar Farid, Deputy Minister of Culture of Indonesia, for him to tell us about the foremost aspects of the conference. Deputy Minister, thank you so very much for your work. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. Buenos dias. Selamat pagi.
Good morning.
Ministers, heads of delegation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you for putting trust in me to present the oral report of the UNESCO World Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development, Mondiacult 2022, which the government of Mexico hosted at the National Auditorium and the historic cultural complex of Los Pinos in Mexico City. This conference took place 40 years after the landmark Mondiacult 1982. Mondiacult 2022 gathered 2,750 registered participants from 150 states, including 136 ministers and vice ministers, as well as representatives of civil society, from academia to cultural professionals and artists, as well as the private sector. 33 intergovernmental organizations, more than 100 NGOs, and bilateral cooperation agencies. The conference was structured around 2 plenary meetings, 18 thematic sessions, 14 side events, and 2 exhibitions. The government of Mexico delighted the audience from the opening of this conference until last night with several cultural performances. Mondiacult 2022 was honored by the presence of distinguished authorities at its opening ceremony, which featured addresses by Her Excellency Ms. Beatriz Gutierrez Müller, representing the Constitutional President of the United Mexican States, His Excellency Mr. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the Director General of UNESCO, Her Excellency Ms. Audrey Azoulay, and the Minister of Culture of Mexico, Her Excellency Ms. Alejandra Frausto Guerrero. Following the opening ceremony, Mr. Ernesto Otone Ramirez, UNESCO Assistant Director General for Culture, opened the first plenary session, which adopted the rules of procedure and the agenda of the conference, and elected the officials of the conference as follows. Her Excellency Ms. Alejandra Frausto Guerrero, the Minister of Culture of Mexico, as President of the conference, representing Electoral Group 3, Latin America and the Caribbean. His Excellency Mr. Miguel Iceta Lorenz, Minister of Culture and Sports of Spain, as Vice President, representing Electoral Group 1, Western Europe and North America. Her Excellency Ms. Nina Obuljen-Korzinek, Minister of Culture of Croatia, and Vice President representing Electoral Group 2, Eastern Europe. Her Excellency Ms. Faustina Namutenya, Vice Minister of Education, Arts and Culture of Namibia, as Vice President representing Group 5A, Africa. His Highness Prince Badr bin Abdullah bin Mohammed bin Farhan Al Saud, Minister of Culture of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as Vice President representing Group 5B, Arab States. And myself as Rapporteur representing Group 4, covering Asia and the Pacific. The Bureau held 2 meetings in the course of the conference, respectively on Thursday, 29th of September, and Friday, today, 30th of September, just before this session started. Now let me highlight the salient points of the thematic sessions, which covered 4 themes. The first theme was addressed by 6 successive panels, which discussed ways to renew and strengthen cultural policies in the face of contemporary challenges. The current global context, marked by a multifaceted crisis combined with growing inequalities and uncertainties, has hit the cultural sector particularly hard, shedding light on the sector's vulnerability and calling for the adaptation of cultural policies. The climate crisis urges us to review our cultural policies for more sustainable patterns. Digital transformation is also a game changer for the cultural sector, which invites us to ensure equal access to and diversity of digital content. In this context, education is essential. More than ever, we must invest in professionalizing our sector and strengthening linkages between culture and education to forge resilient societies. Issues related to cultural rights were brought to the fore, including the need to secure the status and socio-economic rights of artists and cultural professionals and guarantee artists' freedom of expression to strengthen democratic and human rights-based societies. Many delegates pointed to the importance of inclusive policies, fully engaging civil society, local communities, and youth, as well as supporting gender equality. The issue of cultural data was also stressed, highlighting the need for more evidence-based, robust policies. Interventions featured examples of innovative measures and mechanisms intended to provide basic revenues and decent working and livelihood conditions to artists, to empower the cultural sector in the face of digitization, to develop evidence-based data, and to counter illicit trade of cultural goods. Public-private partnerships and regional cooperation were highlighted as critical to support the steady growth of the creative economy, combined with innovative financing mechanisms, notably for youth. Enhanced cross-sectoral programs and policies were presented, linking culture and education, as well as emerging concepts such as cultural democracy. Looking forward, most interventions.
De cara al futuro, la mayoría de las intervenciones hicieron hincapié en la necesidad de una formulación de políticas multifacética, transversal y más ágil, señalando la necesidad de una colaboración
combat racism and discrimination, foster dialogue and mutual understanding, and forge a renewed multilateralism was also highlighted. Echoing these priorities, delegations agreed that the time has come for a new global commitment to shape innovative cultural policies conducive to peace and well-being. The time has come for policymakers to place culture center stage and to recognize and promote culture as a global public good. In this sense, many delegations called for a standalone sustainable development goal, the 18th SDG, acknowledging culture in its own right. Speakers underscored that countries cannot wait another 40 years to meet again and address the impact of cultural sustainable development. Ministers of culture should commit to meeting on a regular basis to assess challenges and devise priorities to adapt to the fast-evolving global context. Dedicated regional mechanisms should also be established to support the cultural sector's governance. Several delegations underlined that the final declaration would constitute a roadmap for cultural policies in the years to come. The second theme was addressed in 5 successive panels, which considered the issue of heritage and cultural diversity in crisis. Growing threats include crisis, forced migrations, armed conflicts, and natural hazards. Destruction of heritage in countries facing conflict is a growing phenomenon, while the intentional destruction of heritage and the looting and illicit trafficking of cultural property has devastating consequences on the identity, transmission, and memory of communities. Appeals were made for the international community to join forces towards upfront unanimous condemnation of the destruction of cultural heritage in all its forms. The need to strengthen collective cultural rights in the context of crisis as a prerequisite for the protection of cultural diversity was also highlighted. Delegations described measures and mechanisms undertaken to safeguard heritage through UNESCO's cultural conventions, including developing new national legislations and policy to strengthen heritage conservation, promote cultural and linguistic diversity, and protect indigenous peoples' knowledge. The looting of cultural property in times of armed conflict required more deliberate action with a view to return and restitution. The international community should also invest in the reconstruction and rehabilitation of museums after armed conflicts. Actions undertaken in coordination with international organizations to support the conservation and restoration of cultural heritage in countries affected by armed conflict and climate change were also presented. In that context, delegates advocated for concerted efforts and strengthened emergency response and coordination mechanisms. The implementation of UNESCO's 1954 Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict and the 1970 Convention on Illicit Trafficking of Cultural Property was underlined as a critical tool for the protection of cultural heritage, particularly in conflict areas. Harnessing culture for peace building and protecting cultural diversity was highlighted as a critical area deserving greater investment. Delegations emphasized the need to prioritize community engagement and develop people-centered approaches. A proposal was put forward to establish an intergovernmental observatory for peace and security through cultural diplomacy. The third theme was addressed in 4 successive panels, focusing on culture for sustainable development. Delegations unanimously agreed that culture plays a transformative role in achieving sustainable development and underlined the sector's vulnerability in the face of global challenges. Initiatives intended to unlock the full potential of culture for sustainable development were shared in the field of cultural and public policies. Interventions testified to the need to strengthen linkages between culture and education, including through greater investment in arts education and the inclusion of culture in school curricula and technical and vocational education and training. Ensuring artistic freedom was also highlighted as a prerequisite to fostering human-centered development, pointing to the importance of policies targeting artists and cultural professionals' mobility and status. In this context, the crucial role of UNESCO in stimulating a global reflection and providing spaces for international cooperation was highlighted. A renewed engagement in the safeguarding of traditional knowledge was also expressed, notably by fostering climate action and disaster risk reduction. Likewise, accelerated investment in the creative economy was put forward as a means to promote economic and social development, curbing inequalities and fostering more inclusive societies. The implementation of the UNESCO Cultural Conventions was also highlighted as a strong lever to promote culture at the core of sustainable development strategies and prospects, while emphasizing the need for novel approaches to expand the voices and engagement of communities and stakeholders concerned. A renewed call was voiced to better profile culture in the post-2030 agenda, including through the adoption of a dedicated sustainable development goal. The fourth theme was addressed in 3 successive panels focusing on the future of the creative economy, which highlighted that its contribution to inclusive, diversified economic growth, as well as society's well-being and cohesion, is increasingly acknowledged, notably in its capacity to foster the appreciation of cultural diversity and to engage youth, women, and rural communities. The cultural and creative industry were also put forward as catalysts for the protection of heritage and a growing engine for the development of sustainable cultural tourism. Interventions particularly stressed the impact of the digital transformation, which facilitated access to culture and distribution of cultural content, a shift accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, while also weakening cultural and linguistic diversity and exacerbating the digital divide. The sector's persisting informality and the pandemic's impact were particularly underlined. Delegations recognized the vital role of the 2005 UNESCO Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions in supporting the emergence of a dynamic creative sector. Measures presented by speakers included the establishment of artist guilds and regional platforms in support of the creative economy, the inclusion of arts and innovative skills in schools and educational systems, the establishment of creative youth hubs and economic agencies, the establishment of an international prize for the creative economy, and initiatives intended to provide new values to old crafts. Delegations stressed the importance of cooperation between state and non-state actors, and the need for deepened global cooperation and interdisciplinary collaboration within the creative economy. It was commonly agreed that creators should be supported in adapting to digital transformation. The need for strengthened policy investment to bolster intellectual property rights and the copyright of products and services, and to better protect rights of freedoms, was also underlined. Interventions called for strengthened investment in policy, support frameworks for artists, and greater collaboration was called for between governments, civil society, and the private sector. The need to invest in cultural data was highlighted to monitor the transversal contribution of the creative economy and support evidence-based interventions, including through the implementation of the 2030 culture indicators. Some speakers called for a global mechanism for creative services in the digital space and strengthened regulation of creative content. Well, now we have reached the end of the conference oral report, which reflects the depth of our exchanges and the urgency to address critical issues affecting the sustainability of the sector. Let me now conclude with 3 personal reflections that have emerged from these 2.5 days. Firstly, a call for leveraging the power of culture across policy dimensions, including for well-being and resilience, was firmly put forward by states and civil society organizations who underlined the need for public policies for social justice. This is a concern that binds us As ministers of culture, we must redouble our efforts to provide further evidence of culture's contribution to social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Secondly, no country can overcome today's challenges in isolation. It is our paramount responsibility as public policy leaders to uphold the role of culture for renewed international diplomacy. Through multilateral dialogue, we can forge solutions to global challenges. In this regard, I would like to thank UNESCO once again for providing this global platform 40 years after the first Mondiacult to ensure a renewed dialogue and strengthen cultural diplomacy globally. And I also, on behalf of the participants, want to give a shout out to people who have been working hard for many months, the Secretariat, the technical staff, and the volunteers who have made this wonderful conference possible. Thirdly and lastly, I'm deeply convinced that there can be no future without culture. Culture is the only renewable energy that can unite us towards shaping a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Minister. And being a rapporteur is not easy to summarize everything that has happened in these 18 thematic sessions that brought our states together with the associated organizations. Your report is a testimony to the shared richness of all of participants in the conference and reflects the concerns and opportunities of the cultural sector today. Thank you so much for your impeccable work, and a very warm welcome, a very warm hello to the entire population of Indonesia, and let's give him a warm clap. As you know, Mondiacult is a ministerial conference, but it is also the conference of all cultural actors, intergovernmental organizations, development banks, bilateral cooperation agencies, local authorities, national and local cultural institutions and organizations, the private sector, civil society organizations, professional networks, academics, and in particular artists and the cultural community in general. All have contributed so the conference would be an open and inclusive one. This multiplicity of voices demonstrates that culture, far from being the exclusive domain of public action, is profoundly cross-sectional and addresses all the stakeholders involved. I now invite you to immerse yourselves in the stellar elements of this work. To this end, to make this rainbow visible, I'm pleased to give the floor to two promoters of the side events, Ms. Amelia Maria Mazzine of the Arterial Network, member of the Culture 2030 Coalition, and the Mexican composer Arturo Márquez. You have the floor.
I am Maria Manjate from Mozambique. I am a program officer at the Observatory of Cultural Policies in Africa, and also activist for culture and natural heritage. Before I present the report, I would like first to express my sincere gratitude to the German Commission for UNESCO because I'm here attending this Mondiacult as a young expert for fair culture movement. And I had the opportunity to take the floor on the two-side event as a panelist on fair culture as a key to sustainable development, and also on the accelerating education culture linkage through collaboration organized by IFLA. I believe that this fair culture movement will be probably the new direction the culture sector can take, a fair culture in creation, production, and dissemination. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Maria Manjat from the Observers of Culture Policies in Africa. It's a great honor for me to report on the side events held as a part of the Mondiacult 2022 conference. I allow myself to present compliments to UNESCO for promoting the central role of culture in global and sustainable development and showing a possible way out from the current complex situation of the world. As the Director General of UNESCO, Andre Azoulay, emphasized during the opening ceremony of the conference, the importance of hearing the voice of the people who are primarily concerned by the growing challenge water facing, culture professionals small remain at the heart of our priorities. As a civil society actors, we are firmly engaged to voice these needs, concern and opportunities for artists and cultural professionals in order to guide and inform our future policies. In the run-up of the conference, member states, international government, academia, UNESCO chair, as well as a civil society organization, joined forces to highlight diverse perspectives on the transformative impact of culture on sustainable development through 100 side events. Over the past 2 days, 14 side events, including 2 exhibitions, have brought together more than 300,000 participation, both in presence and online. The first event on accelerating education culture linkage through collaboration, exploring partnership with libraries and other cultural institutes held by the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutes, focus on the linkage between culture and education, which are critical for emotional well-being, cultural participation, and international dialogue. Panelists called for more intersectoral and cultural ministerial cooperation to further enhance the role of both schools and cultural institutions while recognizing the role of communities. The European Commission, Partnership for Inclusive and Sustainable Policies, event focused on the need of institutional culture, North-South and South-South cooperation through innovation, partnership, and funding mechanisms. Representative of regional intergovernmental organizations called for a more systematic sharing of good practice and the lesson learned. The third event, the United Sites and the local governments and the World Site Culture Forum led the event on following thematic: sites upfront for culture rights. Experimental and innovative practice in urban culture policy to talk globally challenge, including COVID-19, and provide sustainable solutions were presented. A call was also made for great involvement of local governments in the shaping of culture policies frameworks. Number 4, from policy to practice, the role of culture in 2020 agenda and beyond. Organized by the Cultural 23rd Gold Champion and the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, advocated for cultural agents to accelerate sustainable development while presenting a zero draft for a culture goal, and a new toolkit on the sustainable development goal for culture and heritage organization at the national level. The African Union, promoting the creative economy and the restitution of the cultural heritage for strong regional integration. The event explored ways to maximize the potential of the culture and creative industry in Africa for great regional integration and sustainable development in line with the 26th Agenda. Issues addressed including the restitution of heritage, the role of culture as a drive for social cohesion and peace building, and the need for fair remuneration. The government for Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden joined forces to discuss the need to strengthen culture policies to promote artistic freedom. Representatives from civil society showcased the challenging conditions under which artists around the world are living and highlighted the importance of involving policymakers, civil societies, and international governance to guarantee artist freedom as a purpose for culture as a global public good. The International Alliance for Protection of Heritage in Conflict Areas inaugurated a fourth exhibition showcasing its action to support local heritage professionals and the protection of museums, archives, libraries, monuments, and sites. The innovative digital approach taken to explore some of the world's endangered heritage in conflict situations allowed us to discover the role of heritage for employment, generation, and community cohesion. The UNESCO Resilience 100 exhibition featured on 100 recommendations and calls from cultural professionals, recognizing their resilience and demonstrating the collective call for more inclusive and responsive cultural governance. UNESCO and the Office of United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights led the side event, Artists for Dignity, Justice, and Peace, presented the Art Lab project aimed at mastering cultural work and arts parties in humanitarian and development policies and programs for the recovery of human rights and dignity. Panelists underlined the importance of establishing civil society platforms for policy making. The Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines, and the National Commission for Culture and Arts of the Philippines led the side event, Data Collection and Measurement for Culture Toward Evidence-Based Policies for Sustainable Development. This side event illustrates how culture data can inform policy and give visibility to cultural contribution to sustainable development and presented the UNESCO Culture 2030 indicators. The Region Center for the Promotion of Books in Latin America and Caribbean organized an event on the following topic: the economics for culture, challenges and opportunities for the digital transformation, in which panelists deliver short presentation simulating the pitch used in the creative industry, negotiation, and address the digitization of the book industry. Climate Heritage Network led the side event, responding to the climate emergency, new imperative for cultural policies. The event aimed at addressing the consequences for the climate change and the biodiversity crisis. Panelists engaging in a reflection on the pivotal role of civil society to imagine a resilient future through culture, emphasizing the climate risk on culture and its role in climate action. The session explored policy frameworks, integrating culture to accelerate adoption and mitigation strategies and strengthen their implementation. The Intelligence Platform on Culture and Sustainable Development led the event on Culture as a Global Public Good, a human-centered agenda for culture and policies. This side event reflected on the impact of COVID-19 and how it has highlighted the crucial role for culture in uplifting communities while fostering resilience. Participants underlined the vital societal role for culture as a global public good and provided guidance on key action to shape culture policies. The Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation led a side event on impacts of culture and heritage on development, 30 years experience. This side event presented its experience in fostering bilateral cooperation on cultural and sustainable development, calling for strengthening advocacy, and defining the agency lines for work for the next years. All these events demonstrated the active and critical role for the civil society plays in the shaping of our culture and the public policy, and we look forward to continuing this multilateral collaboration which UNESCO supports. Je vous remercie for your attention. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, María Manhattan. Ahora quisiera pedirle la palabra al maestro Arturo Márquez. Adelante, maestro.
Buenos días a todos. Es un gran privilegio estar aquí en esta reunión tan urgente, tan especial, con todos ustedes, ministros.
With all of you ministers, and thank you to Alejandra for such a strong partnership and such an important one with worldwide culture. Nothing that has been said today is foreign to us. If we understand that at the heart of this conference there is art, you, the ministers of culture around the world, have turned diplomacy into the art of dialogue. Let me introduce myself. My name is Arturo Márquez. I'm a composer. Last Wednesday, during the inaugural ceremony, I had the possibility to speak to you in the language that I know best, which is music. If there's something that I feel honored by, and Mondiacult 22, is that at the inauguration, there was a performance of I Have a Dream, it's a text, a work of Martin Luther King, which we all know, that I've had in my heart since I was a teenager in the 60s. And this is what you heard at the inauguration. My voice would have been impossible without all of the voices of the children, the hands of the musicians, and their instruments. I consider myself to be privileged to have had the education to be able to have accomplished or compose this work. My voice would have had made any sense had I not heard those on the other side of the stage where that dialogue takes place, where everything counts, including the silences and the sound of the drums. Time is another key thing for creation, and that's why I want to say that Mondiacult was not a 3-day movement, but rather a process where different voices from around the world gathered together. This did not start on Wednesday, nor does it finish today. Mondiacult is a compass for the future. As the person who preceded me said, we come from the Resiliart Forum and from many others. We also come from many hours around a global bonfire that was a gift from a devastating pandemic. Whereas when this was happening, we saw how music, art, the cinema, the books became, all of them, they became an incredible and surprising public health tool. This is nothing new. If we look up and we look at every corner of the world, we'll see that the future has a very ancient heart. When we speak about the culture of peace, we talk about dialogue. When we talk about protecting heritage, we talk about taking care.
When we speak about imagining the future, we speak about creating. When we speak about culture as our common good of mankind, we speak of coexisting. When we speak of culture, we speak of many cultures. And the Mediterranean diet wouldn't be understood without tomato, and pasta wouldn't be possible without Chinese noodles. Coffee, originating from Africa, threads its weaves with the sugar from the Americas. Arab numbers are a gift to mankind. So we are everywhere and we are in everything. One culture are many cultures, and cultural change occurs because of cultural exchange and for the permanent exchanges with our neighbors, because, as Octavio says, makes our existence full. Mondiacult wouldn't have made any sense if it had not brought together the voices of artists, of managers, and scholars in the light of climate change and in the light of all the conflicts and poverty. Citizens are obliged to build social intelligence. Creativity and imagination are the two gifts of the culture of development. It is my privilege to make a recount of how citizens got involved with their ideas and their concerns and their proposals to build on the Mondiacult Declaration. So this is what lies behind the 46 international fora that took place towards Mondiacult 2022 with over 1,000 participants, specialists, scholars, creators, artists, public officers, representatives of the civil society and of the indigenous peoples, and 210 different activities, including conferences, roundtables, discussion fora, and workshops. The fora reached more than 208,000 reproductions. So we want to understand this cultural change brought about by COVID-19. So 19 conferences were carried out in Chapultepec with opinion leaders from many countries of the world, and they were reproduced more than 200,000 times. More than 60 universities from throughout the world joined the discussions to speak about education, culture, and sustainable development. Likewise, more than 10 states from Mexico organized theme fora on topics such as the cultural rights of childhood, creative economy, collective rights, the inseparable binomial between art and nature, community, culture, and the relationship between migration and culture. We were supported by the more than 40 departments of the Ministry of Culture in Mexico, and we were backed up by 23 international culture organizations, as well as by many corporations that were key in the discussions regarding PPPs. We must also add the 17 Chapultepec conferences that brought together the best of art, literature, and contemporary thinking. So individual fora towards Mondiacult brought people like Franco Bifo Berare and Celio Turino, former Minister of Culture of Brazil, David Harvey, a geographist and a social theorist, Nestor Garcia Granclini, who is a writer and anthropologist, and a critical Sylvie Duran, former Minister of Culture of Costa Rica, Alphonse Martinel, who is an expert in development and cultural cooperation, Jeremy Corbyn, ex-leader of the Labour Party of the UK, Luis Garcia Montero, who is a poet, and Lilia Assam, Patricio Pron, Fabricio Mejia, Alberto Ruiz Sanchez, who are writers, Elizabeth Duval, who is a philosopher, Ursula Mielman, who's a video artist, Nicolas Hernandez Guillen, an art manager, Valerie Miller, a publisher, Jomana Haddad, who's a writer, Enrique Norte, who's an architect, Aluk Edwardson, who's an artist, and thanks to IFACA, the INACDI, and the Centro Cultural Tijuana, it was that citizens were able to take part in an unprecedented exercise called Open Microphone, where hundreds of citizens' proposals were received to feed the Mondiacult agenda. Mondiacult is also unprecedented because we were able to hear the citizens. Thinking of us is unthinkable if we are not to build it based on social conscience, because it will be the transformative power of art and culture that will save us. If you don't believe that, look at your side in this global campfire and see how in talking to each other, in listening to each other, we can build consensus. I would like to commend the ministers for building this compass. The future of culture lies on its present. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Marquez. So in addition to being the composer of Danzón No. 2, which is very renowned, he's also a teacher in our community schools. So thank you very much for this report. And on behalf of all the voices of the world, I would like to thank also the UNESCO for making this possible. So we will watch a video that will synthesize our conference and will also speak of the long way to Mondiacult. We have brought together cultural networks from many parts of the world. And please, let's watch the video.
gracias por la realización de los foros, pero por esta relatoría audiovisual que demuestra el carácter propiciador de Mondiacult, el entusiasmo de todas las personas que han querido participar en esta reflexión.
Have wanted to be involved in this global reflection. So we are reaching the end of our work, and I would like to propose that we move on to the last item of the agenda, which refers to the adoption of the final declaration of our conference. It is truly commendable of the effort that we have made throughout the last few days and the last few months, which is reflected in the text that we are submitting to you for their adoption. This text is built upon consensus, which is only possible by culture. These are not only words, but it is a manifest that establishes a common view for future of culture, and it gathers our priorities, our challenges, and our aspirations. This is not the end, but just a starting point. The Bureau has been a key role in the process, the Bureau sitting here in this table. The Bureau has been critical throughout the process that ends today and has supported the dialogue throughout each of the groups. As you know, Bureau is integrated by the four vice presidents and the rapporteur who are sitting in the rostrum this morning. I would like to thank you all very much for that. I would like to particularly commend His Excellence, the Lord Parkinson of Whiteley Bay, as a former Under Secretary of Parliamentary State Minister of the Arts of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and His Excellency Mr. Abdoulaye Diop, former Minister of Culture and Communications of Senegal, who actively contributed throughout the process. And I would like to thank all the member states without exception for having contributed to this collective text. Each of your contributions was critical. We were able to make the world unite in a historical manner. So before we proceed to adopt the ministerial declaration of the conference, I would like to ask the audience that if there are any comments on the declaration, you will be allowed to speak once the text has been adopted. If there are no objections, I would like to proceed with the adoption of the ministerial declaration of our conference. Would you agree, if any one of you wants to do it, to take the floor after the declaration is adopted? I remind you that the draft final declaration is included in the working documents on your tables, and the document is Mondiacult 2022/CPD/6 is available in all 6 official United Nations languages. So if you agree, then I will propose that we approve the declaration by acclamation. I do not see any objections. So as there are no objections, therefore our declaration has been approved, and again, let's give ourselves a round of applause for that. I will ask you, in this very Mexican style, let's take our flowers and put them in the air and show them as a way of closing our agreement. Put it up. So, dear everyone, truly, let's commend and congratulate ourselves for this outcome, particularly in this very strenuous context of the world. We have, again, proven the power of culture. We have proven that we are able to build bridges that are unthinkable for our countries. The boys and girls from Ecatepec were the ones who brought the flowers to you. They live in a place of a shameful and painful poverty, but through culture, they are building their future and they are repairing their wounds. And before we officially close the meeting, I would like to give the floor to the different states that have requested the floor after the declaration was approved. So we are just making the list of the states who will take the floor.
Lithuania, the floor.
So we have Lithuania.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm making the statement on behalf of the following 48 countries: Albania, Andorra, Australia, Canada, Ecuador, Georgia, Guatemala, Iceland, Japan, Moldova, Monaco, Montenegro, New Zealand, Republic of North Macedonia, Norway, Palau, San Marino, Switzerland, Ukraine, the United States and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the European Union comprising the following member states: Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Republic of Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, and my own country, Lithuania. We have met this week in Mexico to foster multilateral cooperation in support of a more resilient cultural sector, better recognized for both its contribution to sustainable development and its promotion of solidarity, peace, and security. While we engage in this discussion, however, one of our members, Russia, continued to pursue an illegal, unprovoked, and unjustifiable war of aggression against Ukraine, in an ongoing violation of international law, including the United Nations Charter and the mandate of the UNESCO. Since its creation in 1945, the task UNESCO set itself is to build peace in the minds of men and women. This is the responsibility we have taken on this week, with culture at the heart of our agenda. Across UNESCO's regional groups, as we prepared for the Mondiacult, states highlighted the importance of cultural heritage for identity, social cohesion, peace and security, emphasizing the need for concerted transnational measures, as well as investigations and coordinated actions to address threats to tangible and intangible cultural heritage. And yet, as of 21st September, UNESCO has verified damage to 193 sites since Russia's February 2022 full-scale invasion began. 81 religion sites, 13 museums, 37 historical buildings, 35 buildings dedicated to cultural activities, 70 monuments, and 10 libraries. Ukrainian figures are higher still. The Ukrainian Ministry of Culture and Information Policy estimates damage to 514 cultural sites, including 38 museums, 174 religious sites, and 257 historic buildings. In addition, there are multiple media reports that Russian forces are looting cultural property, including 2,000 exhibits which have disappeared from museums across Mariupol. Russia continues to break commitments it has made at UNESCO, including under the 1954, 1970, and 1972 conventions. We cannot stand by as one country attempts to erase another country's identity and culture. We cannot accept continued actions contrary to UNESCO's constitution and our common conventions. We call on Russia immediately to withdraw beyond Ukraine's internationally recognized borders and demand the immediate end of the aggression against Ukraine, so as to guarantee protection from further damage and harm to Ukrainian natural, built and movable cultural heritage in all its forms. In the midst of Russia's war of choice, we commend actions already taken by UNESCO and member states to support and safeguard Ukraine's culture and look forward to contributions toward rebuilding Ukraine. Thank you.
Gracias, Lituania. Gracias a todos.
Thank you, Lithuania. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this common presentation. And now, Africa. The floor is yours, South Africa.
Thank you very much, President of the conference. And perhaps it would be important to start by saying that the world today is engulfed in conflict. The African Union's main objective in its AU Agenda 2063 is to silence the guns on the African continent. So therefore, the issue of conflict is not only happening between Russia and Ukraine today in the world. We have states which have been run down and trying to reconstruct and redevelop themselves, like Mali in Africa. Our approach, therefore, on matters of conflict is that the global governance bodies like the United Nations must be given an opportunity to intervene and ensure that conflicts are dealt with amicably. We cannot, therefore, seated here, want to take sides on a matter which has to be resolved by the global community. Secondly, President, the declaration, I think that we support it wholly as it appears on the text on our desk currently, as has been uploaded here, and we applaud it. Further, want to add that there is a need to create a brain bank mechanism which is uniformed under the aegis of UNESCO for performance and monitoring of the cultural and creative economy based on research and development. So the point here is that if we are going to be serious about this economy, research and development should foreground it. Institutionalizing evidence-based approaches is key for the sustainability of the cultural and creative industry. Modernity places as key to social progress, creativity, innovation, and digitization. Remember that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Thank you very much, President.
Gracias, Sudáfrica.
Thank you, South Africa. We will give the floor now to Chile. Thank you, dearest chairperson, vice chairs, secretary. I simply wanted to express my appreciation, my deep appreciation for these 3 days of work, the so very warm welcome given to us by Mexico, and to express my thanks to the organization of this conference, which has been so successful. Chile is very pleased to approve, to adopt this declaration because it truly takes to heart the voices of the Latin American and Caribbean peoples. We would like to reassert the fact that we are together here throughout the world, vis-à-vis the entire world, to deal with cultural matters. It's very important. Establishing the need that different regions have fora to follow up on Mondiacult and to prepare for upcoming events that we will be holding every 4 years. We also need to reassert, finally, the need to have a sustainable development goal related to culture in the next agenda. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Chile. Thank you, Julieta. Argentina has asked for the floor. You have the floor. Thank you very much for this meeting, this essential meeting during these times that we are experiencing. After the pandemic and so much illness, so much death, we hope for a better world, a fairer, more solidary world. It's not the case. Once again, we have violence, death, destruction of the planet, violence in its different expressions. The war is there, present once again in our America, poverty, death. In our country, the recent attempt to assassinate our former President, Cristina Kirchner, was obviously terrible, who worked so far, under such difficult conditions for her people. Once again, here in Mexico, we are faced with the transforming power of culture. The discourses of hate, let's them offset them with the discourses of love. Violence and death, let's offset it by the culture of peace and life. Once again, thank you, Mexico. Thank you, UNESCO. Thank you very much to all of you. And now we give the floor in representation of the movement of the non-aligned countries. Azerbaijan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. First of all, congratulations to Mexico for successful organization of today's Mondiacult. I would like to also congratulate Mexico and the UNESCO for taking the leadership on this issue. Now, with your permission, I would like to read out this statement on the behalf of the non-alignment movement members as a chair of the NAM. The NAM has always played a fundamental role in strengthening the international peace and security in accordance with the Bandung Principles and is committed to preserving and strengthening the values of multilateralism and international cooperation. NAM considers the multilateralism as a means to address the complex and newly emerging threats and challenges that affect every member in the international community. NAM reaffirms its condemnation of all forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and any kind of related intolerance, which constitute serious violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms, as well as impede equal opportunity. Non-alignment movement underlines the importance of national, regional, and international initiatives for the protection of all cultural properties and to prevent exportation of cultural property from occupied territories in the event of armed conflict, in accordance with the principles of 1954 Hague Convention and its protocols. Non-member states expressed their serious concern over the problem of non-implementation of provisions of the 1970 Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural properties by UN member states, and urge UNESCO's Secretariat to join their voices to denounce vigorously these illegal crimes against national heritages and identities of the states in accordance with the relevant conventions. NAM urges UNESCO to identify the stolen or illegally exported cultural properties in accordance with the relevant conventions on the subject, and also urges the process of returning these properties to the countries of origin in compliance with the relevant resolutions of the General Assembly. NAM underlines the need to make efforts to include culture in future development agenda. NAM recognizes the important role of education in the promotion of culture of peace and dialogue among civilizations, religions, and cultures, and the role of civil society and faith-based non-governmental organizations and media as appropriate in promoting interfaith, intercultural, and intercivilizational dialogue and understanding towards fostering cultural diversity and the realization of internationally agreed goals, including sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Gracias, Azerbaiyán.
Thank you, Azerbaijan. New Caledonia.
Madam Chair, thank you for letting me take the floor. Honorable Minister, Head of Country Delegation, representative of national and international NGO agency, the following Pacific Island delegation present at this Mondiacult Conference 2022, Aotearoa, New Zealand, Cook Island, Kiribati, Nauru, New Caledonia, Tonga et Tuvalu extend our gratitude to the people and government of Mexico and UNESCO who host and the organization of this auspicious event. We pay our respect to all indigenous and cultural community represented here today and acknowledge the indigenous people of this land on which we gather. We thank all country delegation for this collegiality and sharing an opportunity to strengthen culture for sustainable development over the past 3 days. We offer the statement in the Pacific spirit of solidarity, humility, and reciprocity. Culture is valued by the people of the Pacific. It forms the backbone of our society and remains a source of resilience and social cohesion. While many Pacific Island countries have made advances in achieving sustainable development, their inherent vulnerability, including small seas, remoteness, climate change impact, biodiversity, and narrow resource base, mean that progress for many continue to be hampered, and their status as a special case for sustainable development remains. Climate change has a very tangible impact on the Pacific Island country. slow honest events such as sea level rise pose an existential threat to many of our communities which are situated in low-lying coastal areas. This threat will likely require drastic measures such as relocation of population with the related challenge it poses. These challenges are compounded by limited institutional capacity, scarce financial resources, and high degree of vulnerability of systematic shock. Nevertheless, Pacific Island countries pose an attentiveness to environmental variability which has contributed to traditional knowledge that inform climate change adaptation strategy. Shift and trend are an integral part of way of life of the society of elaborate coping strategy, providing a crucial foundation for community-based adaptation strategy. This form part of our culture transferred and as traditional or cultural and natural heritage. It also poses a real threat to intangible cultural heritage and indigenous language through displacement and climate migration. In the Pacific, cultural and natural heritage are understood to be one and the same, and their importance extend beyond the economic. Pacific culture are inherently based on the ecological relationships and biodiversity hold holistic and spiritual value for our community. The prospection of natural and cultural heritage is an important issue for the livelihood for us, as industries like tourism and fisheries can constitute over half of the GDP of many economies. Culture is essential for the people-centered approach to sustainable development. It plays a central role in achieving social cohesion and stability, economic development, environmental sustainability, and resilient community. This is why we commend members of the adoption of the declaration from this Mondiacult Conference 2022 and look forward to an inclusive and collaborative approach to his implementation. Estimate Delegate, again, we thank the government of the people of Mexico for hosting Mondiacult Conference. We thank UNESCO for its stewardships in steering this important conservation. We also make a special acknowledgement to the hundreds of volunteers who made this conference an extra special one. And finally, we wish our delegate Godspeed for your journey home. Meitaki, vinakavakalevu malo apitu tofa soifua tena katoa poleti kamrambawa. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you very much. Now we'll give the floor to Venezuela. Good afternoon. I would like to express my appreciation and congratulations to Mexico for the formidable manner in which this World Conference on Cultural Policies was undertaken and held. A round of applause for Mexico, please. Long live Mexico. Alejandra, the Republic of Venezuela, would echo the words that were expressed by Madam Beatriz Gutierrez Müller, the wife of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. We second those words completely. This is our position, and I'm sure that the vast majority of Latin America does the same. We would like to insist to this plenary forum on the need that UNESCO, at some time, just as in 1954, UNESCO adopted the Convention on the Protection and Safeguard of Cultural Heritage and Diversity in cases of armed conflict, We believe that UNESCO needs to establish, adopt, locate, create, invent mechanisms to protect heritage, cultural diversity, cultural rights of our peoples vis-à-vis coercive unilateral measures that unfortunately, under the guise of sanctions, are affecting the daily exercise of these rights after the decisions of powerful nations. It cannot be professionals, artists, those who have ancestral knowledge, who have to pay the consequences of political decisions that have indiscriminate damage to our societies. In Venezuela, we have denounced these hostile actions that are declarations that are not declarations of conventional war, but they do represent crimes against humanity. And UNESCO, we believe, could give that protection to the peoples of our lands. We also believe that it is, although it's true that these fora are undertaken more often, but 40 years ago, let's recover lost time. And during the time that we have between now and the next one, let's rebroach what UNESCO did. Let's stop the problem of communication in the contemporary world. At that time, the imbalance of the information world, and thanks to the work of Shan McBride, Nobel laureate and President of Ireland, established a commission that studied the problem and wrote a historic report, the McBride Report. If that was done at that time against a handful of media, why can't we do it now when there is such a cultural communication power in the hands of corporations that were not elected? How can we allow them to have such a decisive impact in public opinions in our peoples? These are cases of concentration of power, enemies of the true cultural rights and freedoms of our peoples. Armed conflicts that we have all over the planet, there is still a cultural root that needs to be faced with the best efforts from all cultures, recognizing diversity, as we've seen in this cultural policy conference. Long live cultural diversity. Long live the peoples of the world. Long live a humane humanity. Thank you so very much. Thank you. We would give the floor to Russia.
I would like to thank UNESCO for this event. Now, you, esteemed delegates, saw how representatives of 148 countries you've seen that the war has been ongoing for 8 years, but no country has spoken anything about the victims, thousands of victims, lost children in Luhansk and Donetsk. Such statements are unacceptable. They offset the balance in the world and the balance that UNESCO is trying to preserve. Thank you.
¿Terminó? Gracias.
Tienen que soltar el canal. Thank you very much to the delegations. We no longer have requests to take the floor. I would like to let you all know that the interventions and the speakers. Oh, pardon me. We are going to give the floor to Saudi Arabia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to thank, on behalf of the Minister of Culture, Madam Abdullah Farhan Al Saud, who is the Vice President of the Arab Group. I would like to thank the Mexico for this organization, this great organization of this conference. I would like to thank UNESCO for its work in this conference. I would like to thank our colleagues, Your Excellencies, and the presidents and the chairs of the other groups, other geographical groups. We support the report or the communique today, and we look forward to the activation, to the beneficial activation of this report. And this is what we wish for, the successful of this report. And we would like to express our desire to work and cooperate with everyone to develop and to work together with the UNESCO and the member states in order to implement the outputs of this report. And thank you, Marata, once again, Madam Chairman, and I would like to thank Mexico for the great organization of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Ahora
Thank you ever so much. I believe there are no longer any speakers who would like to take the floor. As I was saying, I would like to ensure that all interventions, I would like to tell you that all interventions are going to be reflected on the record of the conference. We will now move on to the closing portion of this conference, Mondiacult 2022. And for this, I would like to invite Madam Tamara Rastoak, dear Tamara, President of the Executive Board of UNESCO. You have the floor, Madam.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear all, first allow me to warm-heartedly thank our Mexican hosts for the fantastic hospitality demonstrated to all of us during these amazing few days. After 5 regional consultations, months of intense negotiations, and this global conference that attracted an unprecedented number of ministers from around the world, there is no doubt that Mondiacult is a true indicator of the importance of the multilateralism and international cooperation. 40 years after its first tenure, Mondiacult brought us all around the same table to inscribe culture high on the global decision-making agenda. Final declaration clearly reaffirms the commitment of the international community in this regard. This should not be taken for granted. We live in the times when our societies are confronted with the vast areas of serious challenges. Culture is no foreign to these challenges. In fact, culture is a crucial element to build resilient societies, strengthen social cohesion, and equip the new generation with the tools needed to face the uncertainties of the future. Access to culture should never be confined to the elite, to inner circle of wealthy people in wealthy nations. On the contrary, we need to continue opening up culture, making it accessible to all, and use it as a means to connect minds and build social justice. If we want culture to fully play this crucial role as a change enabler, it is essential to create synergies also with other areas of our mandate, such as education, media, or even sports. Ladies and gentlemen, in my capacity as the chairperson of the UNESCO's Executive Board, I cannot stress enough how much Mondiacult attracts the interest and attention of our member states. In just a few days, we will hold the autumn session of the board, and the follow-up to the Mondiacult is part of our agenda. Our goal is clear. We want to make sure that UNESCO builds on the outcomes of the World Conference to deliver concrete results on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, there can be no sustainable development without the culture. Yet, if we want culture to thrive in our societies, we need to guarantee our full political support. Mondiacult helps us identify some of the areas where our collective mobilization matters the most, such as the question of cultural rights, impact of digital transformation, fight against illicit trafficking, issue around the institution of cultural property, or increased necessity of the protection of natural and cultural heritage, among others. I look forward to seeing us achieving important results in all these areas through dialogue and joint commitment. Please rest assured of my full and unconditional support as a chairperson of the Executive Board of UNESCO along this journey. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, querida presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President of the Executive Board. Now, I would be very pleased to give the floor to His Excellent Santiago Murazábal, Mr. Santiago Irazábal Murao, President of the 41st session of the General Conference of UNESCO. Please come up to the podium, sir, for your address. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Marcelo Ebrard Casaubon, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico, Madam Alejandra Frausto Guerrero, Minister of Culture of Mexico and Chair of the conference, Madam Tamara Rastovac-Siarmashvili, President of the Executive Board of UNESCO, Mr. Ernesto Otone, Assistant Director General for Culture of UNESCO, on behalf of whom I would like to thank all members of UNESCO for what the Mexican authorities made possible in this event. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today I have the honor of participating in this historical moment. Over 40 years after the first Mondiacult, we find ourselves meeting here to give shape to a new vision of cultural policies. In the words of the diplomat and Mexican poet Octavio Paz, awakening history means becoming aware of our singularity, a time for reflexive thought before delivering ourselves to doing. I think that this phrase translates the singular time that we are experiencing to give shape to a new vision of cultural policies. UNESCO has the incomparable capacity to bring states together and around values and shared aspirations, proposing different approaches and ways of taking action. Mondiacult is here at the perfect time. The presence at this conference of over 100 ministers and deputy ministers, in addition to experts and artists, shows the great relevance of culture as a force for reconstruction and development. After the unprecedented changes provoked throughout the world because of the pandemic, a plural, democratic, and pro-positive reflection on culture was presented as an urgent need. The process for regional and interregional consultations provided us with a broad and representative outlook of contemporary concerns related to culture. On this topic, we have been able to also see the vulnerability of the cultural sector when it is added to other global challenges such as the digital divide and climate change. Adaptation to digital transformation was assuredly one of the most important axes of this joint exercise for thought. The sector of creative economies, one of the most affected by the pandemic, is experiencing a true revolution thanks to the intense shock of technification and digitalization that it has been facing, and it is today, as was reminded to us by the Minister of Culture of Mexico, one of the most dynamic sectors of the world economy. Another very important topic in the discussions in Mondiacult was fighting the illicit traffic of cultural goods, a phenomenon that has intensely increased in the context of a prolonged crisis. Over the past few months, we have walked toward greater commitment of the international community in favor of heritage education campaigns, as well as reinforcing tools that enable protection of cultural goods where the provenance is not proven. We have also seen a recognition of cultural rights as an undeniable tool for social needs, drawing the attention particularly to the need to promote a respect for the identity and valuation of the languages and heritages of peoples, of the indigenous peoples. With this new edition of Mondiacult, we are rebroaching the original spirit of the culture that underlies the Constitution of UNESCO, in which it establishes that in the broad dissemination of culture for freedom and peace, this is indispensable for man's dignity. But perhaps more importantly, the summit has brought back the concept of culture as a structuring element of social relations and no longer as just a phenomenon of the world of politics. Ladies and gentlemen, by reiterating this vision, we are creating the conditions for more prepared societies ready to overcome the challenges of our century, such as inclusion, climate change, and the search for sustainable peace. Indeed, culture needs to occupy a central place, not a marginal place, in the construction of public policies and in all forms of international cooperation. More than ever, we need to promote culture as a global public good, aligned with the initiative of our common agenda of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Undoubtedly, we will have a lot of work to do after this meeting. I am sure that the declaration adopted today is the expression of a dynamic, inclusive multilateralism based on the principles of justice, rights, and human dignity.
En el ámbito cultural exige protagonismo y voluntad de los Estados miembros y necesidad de asegurar la valoración de la diversidad.
I would like to highlight the importance for all members of society. I also think it's fundamental to continue with this forum of discussion and prepare the way for the post-2030 agenda that will take into account the central role of culture for inclusive and sustainable development. The UNESCO, under the leadership of Director General Audrey Azoulay, will continue working intensely with its main agencies to identify priorities and back up efforts with a view to reinforcing the place of culture in the formulation of public policies and extending its benefits to all areas of society. In addition, the organization will continue supporting the evolution of its regulatory frameworks, reaffirming the forum as a forum of discussion and to capacity. So now let's go on to action with conviction that today we are taking a decisive step toward the construction of a better world. I would like to conclude my speech expressing in the name of all of the member states our deep appreciation to the government of Mexico for the impeccable efforts in the organization of this World Conference. Many thanks. Thank you very much for the president, the chair of the president of the General Conference for your statement. Thank you for your words. Mexico has received or welcomed during these days many expressions of appreciation, but it's our appreciation towards you and to UNESCO for your trust in us, for your confidence. We will not be taking any step backwards. Culture will never just be an accessory. It will be an axis for the development of our countries and our peoples. I'm sure that during these days we have served them positively. The organization of this is complex. It's huge. We're not a rich country, but we do have a dream, the dream that humanity will unite as brothers and sisters, and that together we will be able to build peace. That's how we accomplish feats with a huge peaceful and peace army And excuse me if I'm going on a little, I know you've heard a lot from me, but to my cabinet colleagues in the government of Mexico who for the first time are giving culture this importance to culture and who were present at this conference. To the labor secretary, to the first female security minister, the public education minister, a special thanks to the team of the foreign ministry for their impeccable diplomacy, and thank you to Foreign Secretary Marcelo Ebrard. Thank you so much to our venues, to this National Auditorium, to the Los Pinos Cultural Complex, the official residence of the people of Mexico and now of the world, thanks to you. Thanks also to the National Anthropology Museum, of which we are so proud. I'd like to thank the National Guard, the security forces that have protected us throughout, and the government of the City of Mexico for its commitment, and the government of Claudia Sheinbaum. And those that are sometimes invisible but indispensable, over 2,000 making up a peace army working night and day to make this event possible. They are technicians from various trenches so that we could all be connected via the internet in these venues. Thank you to Telmex, to the Federal Electricity Commission, to the interpreters of the official languages of UNESCO who are still working right now. Thank you. Merci. La Sokamati. These interpreters in the 6 official languages and for the first time in an indigenous language in Nahuatl, which is Mexico's most important language. Thank you to the interpreters, whom we've already given a round of applause, these are the young people who throughout these 3 days spread their wings because their roots became deeper, who as of today will be asking at their universities that in the syllabus and those who are studying international relations, that it include culture. And from the Culture Ministry, we'll be offering a free diploma course. And thank you to from the University Anáhuac, the Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Ibero University and Pan American University, and the University of the Valley of Mexico. Thank you to the volunteers. They are the joy of this event. A million thanks. Thanks to the hundreds of boys and girls and young people and young artists who participated in this project. The 850 children who painted the canvas that opened, who opened up that curtain that you see, the ones who participated in the chorus, the ones who handed out the flowers at the theater, yesterday who played the marimbas at the party. Thank you to the dancers, to all of the artists from all disciplines who are part of this initiative, to the dancers, the cooks, the waiters and waitresses who have served us, to the entire community that made it possible for us to be comfortable here. I'd like to thank very particularly the friends who joined us constantly, especially and in a disinterested way, to this effort. Huawei, the FEMSA Foundation, to ICA, Cielito Café, the Expansión Group, Honor, Lincoln, Netflix, TV Azteca, ACAF, and the Inter-American Development Bank, and the government of Saudi Arabia. Thank you for all of your support. The coffee that we've all been drinking was wonderful. Thank you. We can no longer drink coffee without eating dates. To the cultural institutions from the 32 states of Mexico, thank you. Thank you to the wonderful team of those who dream, that of the Ministry of Culture. Thank you. Thank you to this team at the Ministry of Culture, my extended family. They put their heart and their soul in each of their tasks, none of which was small. Thank you to our families who are waiting patiently for us. Thank you to the team devoted, to UNESCO's devoted and impeccable team. For us, this institution will never be the same. It has a name, it has a surname, and we now feel its warm embrace in terms of achieving the impossible. To Azolé, my warmest regards, and thank you for your leadership and your impeccable work at UNESCO. Thank you, Ernesto Tone, for all of your work to lead the long road to get to today. To your entire team, to each and everyone who is here, Paula, Santiago, all of you have been so important to accomplish what we've accomplished today. Yes, a big round of applause to UNESCO and its troops. With a great deal of admiration and warmth, I'd like to thank Dr. Beatriz Gutierrez Müller, the wife of the President of Mexico, for being with us and to express her commitment to culture. Especially, thank you very much to President Andrés Manuel López Obrador for his support so that we could hold this event. Thank you for welcoming the 160 delegates from around the world, because in Mexico, all nations, all peoples are welcome without exception. Now, if you allow me, I will give the floor to the Assistant General for Culture of UNESCO. Thank you, Ernesto. You have the floor. Thank you, Madam President. Esteemed ministers and heads of delegation, what underlies the cultural sector, the foundations have teetered because they've left fissures, cultural fissures that can no longer be repaired. A comprehensive focus is necessary to fix to imagine more sustainable and resilient pathways for a peaceful future. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is facing today what we define as a cultural diversity emergency. If we want to conserve and preserve culture, we must continue supporting the professionals, the works, the stakeholders, the creators, at this time and in the world in which we live, that's in constant change and permanent change, where the entire chain of the cultural ecosystem has to be guaranteed in terms of its social protection and just compensation. The topics that you talked about have to do with those that generally your delegates and ambassadors work on at UNESCO with the Secretariat, to have the opportunity to have a meeting on holistic vision where the regulatory tools, conventions, recommendations, the work on the field, the programs can give life to a work of dialogue, of sharing, of interconnections. This is fundamental. And now I'm going to do precisely what our minister did. I have to give thanks because this has been a very long process, a very tiring, not just because of the last 3 days, and of many people who have been involved. we'd like to thank, first of all, to all of the ministers and vice ministers, ambassadors, delegations, for their commitment and their confidence and trust in the Secretariat and in Mexico, in the Ministry of Culture. To thank the government of Mexico, to the members of the Bureau, to Alejandra, our minister, to her vice minister, Marina, to Pablo Rafael, to Minister Bremer, to Gustavo, Iraí, Susana, and all of the team from the ministry. Of course, I have to give thanks to the UNESCO Secretariat, the entire team of the cultural policy entity that's led by Paola. Thank you so much. Emmanuel, Piline, and the entire team, which is one of the youngest teams in the cultural sector. To my colleagues, my close collaborators, which is my executive, Agdoina, Sara, Pablo, Matilda, Ahmed, who's around here somewhere, our legal consultant, Santiago Villalpando, who now is known by the entire world. They have been the pillars of what we've accomplished today. Of course, to all of the technical people who have worked at Los Pinos and the auditorium, it's been a pleasure to get to know you. To all of the interpreters, the translators, for being patient with us and for your commitment. And finally, the volunteers who, as Alejandra said, and excuse me for calling you Alejandra, Minister, it has been a pleasure to see them, the way they helped our international visitors. And in conclusion, if you will allow me, I'm going to go off script, and I'm going to read a poem, and this is the interpreter. I don't know about translating poetry, okay? I'll do my best. So keep in me in the most secret torrents that your river has. And when from us the only thing that's left is a shoreline, also keep me within you. Keep me within you as the question of the waters that flow out. And then when the great great birds fall and the clouds go, keep me in you, that your voice will keep like the cause of the glaciers in which the spring descends. Long live culture. Long live our common objective, and that culture be considered a global public good. And thank you for your commitment. Thank you so much, dear Ernesto. Yes, long live culture. All of this work, it's possible to make it reach the world. Thank you to the media, the communications media, who have helped both national and international, and Mexico's public dissemination system. Thank you to all of you, too. At 11:50 of this morning, we have approved by acclamation this declaration, and now I would like to give the floor to our Foreign Secretary, Marcelo Ebrard Causabon. You have the floor, Mr. Secretary. Good afternoon, distinguished members of the Presidium, the ministers, esteemed ministers, friends. It's an honor to be at this ceremony today. I must say that I was asked a question that would seem difficult to answer at this time or in these times, because there are 16 conflicts going on around the world. It's a time that we could describe as uncertain. There are wars in almost all of the regions of the world. Why is it important then to talk about culture for foreign policy or vis-a-vis foreign policy? Why is a cultural topic so essential in a world that seems to be going towards the escalation of a big conflict? If you will allow me to be able to start answering such a complex question, although perhaps the answer is obvious to some, including myself. But anyway, to start answering, I would say that one would have to ask ourselves why Mondiacult took so long to take place again. It took place in 1982 for the first time. I remember because I had just graduated, and the event was in Mexico. And it filled us with hope. My generation was filled with hope that culture would become a worldwide global agenda with public policy, a common public policy. That was in 1982. From there to 1998 in Sweden. And then to today, 2022. We took a long time to realize what you say in your declaration today. Culture is the hope of humanity, of mankind. It's not an accessory, it's not something optional. It's the axis of our concept of global cohabitation and of all foreign policy that is based on the recognition of understanding other cultures, of having an open mind to understand other civilizations. This is why, and I answer, culture should be part of an axis of any foreign or any respected foreign policy and of global foreign policy. And this is why I'm so appreciative of having been given the opportunity to be here today, at a time, as I was saying, where it's very difficult to find a declaration of such scope that's approved by all countries. Declarations today are exclusionary. They exclude others. They accentuate conflicts. They promote loyalties, or they condemn others, justifiably or unjustifiably, depending on one's position. But it's really, truly extraordinary to have a declaration that talks about the future of humanity and the bases of international coexistence, like the declaration of today. I think it's a wonderful achievement, and I am deeply grateful of the work that you have done to bring this into port. You've given us hope, because as I said at the beginning, it would seem as that we're in the air of a prelude to great conflicts. What can we say? Well, a declaration such as this has an extraordinary value. It fills us with hope once again. And you propose that we should see this every 4 years, that we get together every 4 years, that not another 10 or 20 years go by before we meet again. You talk about great causes here. The recovery of historical and cultural heritage of the peoples, the respect for diversity. And now, in the era of supremacies and racism, you're raising your voice, or Mondiacult is raising its voice to say, no, no, that's not the way. The way is different. Exasperated nationalisms here find their limit. You talk about fraternity, which today almost seems subversive or disruptive. That you propose that we devote ourselves to building fraternity, brotherhood and sisterhood. Wow, that is so laudable that you dare to approve a declaration such as this one. It fills us with hope and a feeling of pride in you and in trust and confidence that humanity will know how to move forward. So congratulations, and really, truly congratulations. And I'm talking in name of the same generation who in 1982 believed this and continues. Long live UNESCO and long live Mondiacult. Many thanks. Thank you very much. Many, many thanks. My friend, Mr. Minister, he's coming from very far away. He's arriving from very far away, and he made the time when landing from Tokyo to come help us at this beautiful closing. Culture is the soul of the peoples. We were able to build over these last few days. It's very easy to destroy, we've said that, but building is what's hard and it's more difficult. And we are not going to allow this agreement that we've come to be destroyed. Thanks to the work of many months, and thank you to all for your will, not just during this meeting, which is just a starting point, but because we are not going to let 40 years go by before seeing each other again, because just as culture is a soul of peoples, our souls are very close now. Thank you very much, because the seed that we have sowed today will germinate and grow throughout the world. Please go, bon voyage back home, safe travels, and go back knowing that you can feel that you did your duty because we were able to unite humanity from our cultural roots. Long live the world's cultural diversity. Long live culture. Many, many thanks. And this conference is now closed. Mondiacult, Mexico 2022. Thank you to everyone. But before we leave, we have an artistic present or gift in acknowledgement of all your work.
No, 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 no. Guárdala, quita. ¿Puedo con el caso? Vente para acá.
Hay que quitar todo, ¿ah? Chicas, vamos a ayudar a mover.
you.